fundamental maps that Mass Ingenuity helped us to develop, and we always referred back to that for how we did our work. So very excited to have Aaron here, and then we'll also be hearing from Cassie with DSHS, the Division of Vocational. And I say your last name, Cassi Villegas, with DSHS, with the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, and they are going to share about their project and a performance management system that Mass Ingenuity helps. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic to Aaron.
Great, thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Just a few little logistics here. I want to double check that even though I have the mic on, am I speaking loud enough? Good. Secondly is we're going to be moving the camera back and forth to aim at whoever's talking, so there'll be that sort of funny bouncing around. And if we drop the camera, somebody come up here and help us, please. And then lastly is oh yes, I'm going to be staring at the camera. We're both going to be looking at the camera, which means we don't get to look at, oh, look at this, a live audience. So I'm going to look away from the camera. Hi. It's great to see you. You know, it is odd, right, to be back together like this, but it's fantastic. But don't be offended if we keep staring at the camera and not at you. Just one of those. So with that, we'll get going. We're going to be talking about enterprise performance management today, and really specifically, well, thank you. Thank you. I need to be louder, right?
Just a little bit. If you want to hold it, you can. Or...
Nah, there we go. I'll put it right there. Anyway, we're going to be talking about enterprise performance management, and specifically about how being data-driven, transparency, and making a learning organization can make a huge all do together. With that, I'm going to go to the next slide, and so we can introduce each other. We'll move in just a moment. Cassie, please.
Hi, everybody. I'm Cassi Villegas. I am the editor at Division within the all of you today.
Thank you, Cassie. And okay, no problem. We'll do it this way then. And again, my name is Aaron Howard, and I'm the president and founders of Mass Ingenuity, and it's just an absolute pleasure to be here today. We'll talk a little bit about what we do in shifting the slide again. There we go. Because it's a COP, we wanted to make sure that we talked a little bit about learning objectives. And so as you can see them here, and really what we're going to do is talk a little bit about how one gets started with enterprise performance management. We're going to talk a little bit about how it gets practically applied, and of course talk about tools. And so really from a learning point of view, hopefully each of those topics will allow you to come away with either more questions, some knowledge, and further discussions.
So sorry, everybody. I do see your chats. We're working on the sound, and I apologize to interrupt you, Aaron. We just want to troubleshoot. For some reason, the folks aren't hearing us okay. Can you all hear me okay right now? You can hear me great. Okay. All right, I'm going to give him my mic.
Should we test it? Can you hear me now? Am I coming through okay?
Got it.
Okay, great. So we'll just basically back up for a second. The learning objectives for today are on this slide, and really we're going to be talking about what is EPM, how do you get started, and what can you expect the experience to be like. So next slide, please. shifting the camera will always be a little weird.
So I just want to talk about DVR really quickly, give you all an overview of our agency. We are within the Department of Social and Health Services, which is, the mothership, the big agency. We are a small division of about 315 FTEs. We help people with disabilities obtain and maintain employment. We serve youth through adults. You can see on the screen, we have our mission, vision, and values there for everybody. We have field service offices all across the state of Washington. And we provide direct services to customers with disabilities, but we also provide services to businesses and other partners and stakeholders. So as you see on the values, we value transparency and innovation really highly, and those are going to be some of the things that we touch on today when we're talking about our enterprise performance management journey.
Thank you, Cassie. Advance the slide, please. A little bit about Mass Ingenuity. These bullets give you kind of an overview, and what I'll do is just describe some of the salient things. First of all, we are focused on enterprise performance management for state government. We started doing that really in 2010, and just had the honor of being able to start serving agencies and never look back. And so today, we're across the nation in about 85 agencies, and it's just been a real pleasure. So we're here obviously in Washington, Oregon, California, Arizona, Mexico, and on and on and on. So it's really enjoyable. It's fun to see all the different folks in all the different domains, ranging from human services to corrections, regulatory. So that's a little bit about us. We probably, some of you know us, we are a consulting firm with technology, and we'll talk a little bit how we integrate all that in just a little bit. So we want to start by talking about the case for change, because whenever we're doing something such as enterprise performance management or just performance improvement or anything, really it's a change. And most of us know that that requires then that we have some sort of reason or case for doing it. And so we're going to actually start by talking about a case for change and what that looks like. So one of the things that is extremely important in getting started is recognizing that talking about how and what before talking about why is in many respects a non-starter. It results in people wondering, I still don't understand why we're doing something. From a change management point of view, it's off to kind of the wrong start. And really from just an organizational development point of view, it feels awkward because all of us basically have one simple question in our mind when people ask us to do something. Why? What? And frankly, what's in it for me? So always starting with why is important. If you haven't had a chance to read anything about this, Simon Sinek's got obviously several books and focus on this. But what we wanted to emphasize is by starting with why, you can move to the how and all that very, very reasonably. Next slide, please.
Okay, so I'm going to dive into the case for change for the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. But before I start, I just want to preface this whole presentation by saying I'm not endorsing Mass Ingenuity or results. I'm endorsing enterprise performance management as a lean tool for organizations. I am a big cheerleader of enterprise performance management, however you want to do it, as a manager, a supervisor, and a leader. It has already served us very well in our agency, and we've seen significant increases in employee engagement, data accessibility, transparency in the work that we're doing, and being able to create that transparency around a lot of the projects that happen at a state office level that maybe our field staff don't always see. So enterprise performance management is something that I'm very passionate about as a lean tool. So I'm just going to go over at a high level today our case for change for DVR. So we wanted to become a data-driven learning organization. Historically, DVR has been very reactive in the way that we approach challenges. We would wait for something big to happen and we would go, oh no, we have to fix this problem. We had a lot of data and information that was spread across the agency in different Power BI dashboards or different Excel spreadsheets, all sorts of information, and none of it was consistent. It was not all in one place. It was not easily accessible to staff. And then also when you could access it, there's a really good chance that that Power BI dashboard was broken or hadn't been updated. And if you can find one that is updated, you may not know how to interpret that data. It may not have been set up for someone who maybe isn't a data nerd like me, and you don't necessarily like want to dig into it and understand all of the numbers that you're seeing on the screen. So we knew that we needed to create some sort of system or adopt a system that put all of this information in one place that was easily accessible for all of our staff to increase our employee engagement, focus on our customer outcomes, and really focus on forecasting with our resources to see where we needed to place those monetary resources, but also our staff capacity and efforts to make sure that we were actually achieving the goals that we had for our agency. So what you see on the screen is pulled directly from our one-pager case for change that went to all of our staff. We implemented results management as our enterprise performance management system. We let our staff know that the reason we were moving toward an enterprise performance management system was for the focus of becoming a data-driven learning organization. We defined those terms for our staff when we sent this notice out in case they didn't know what it meant. So of course, data-driven means we're utilizing data to make decisions. And learning organization, of course, means we want to be agile and focus on that continuous improvement. We want to be flexible with the changes that may come in the future or problems that arise. And so combining data-driven and learning, we know that we will be set for the future, whatever that may bring. And we know that it's very unexpected considering what we've all experienced over the last several years. You could come into work one day and the next day, the entire world has changed. So we want to make sure that we're prepared for anything that may come next. So right now we're working on our fundamentals map. We heard a little bit about that already, and Erin's going to dive into that deeper. I think a lot of agencies use fundamentals maps already. We're obviously using that to define those operational core processes that lead to the major outcomes and goals for our agency. We want to make sure that all staff have an easy visual to access information on where we're focusing efforts to achieve our big overall goals for the agency. I already talked about this a little bit, but that resource focus and continuous improvement efforts are really important. We are in an interesting position as Voc Rehab because we are an employment service. We support people with disabilities to gain employment. We experienced a decrease in customers over the pandemic, and so we have a little bit more money than we normally do, which is a unique problem for vocational rehabilitation, and I think most agencies at this point. So we know that we've got these resources, and we want to make sure the resources that we do have are focused where they need to be focused to get, again, those outcomes that we need to achieve as an agency. We also adopted this system to make sure that we're aligning the work that we do across the agency. And I'll get into that in a second, a little bit about that siloing. That's a common problem for all of us, and it's even more challenging now in the hybrid work environment when you have people that maybe used to all be in one office, now they're all over the state. They're not having those cubicle water cooler conversations. And so we've seen an increase in siloing with hybrid, and we wanted to decrease that as much as possible in a way that, again, was accessible and transparent information for all of our staff. All right, so why are we doing this? We had some bullets here for you, again, pulled directly from our case for change that went to our staff. We want to improve efficiency and effectiveness. So, you know, foundational lean fundamentals there. The accountability of the services that we provide is something that we want to be really focused on as well. We want to make sure that we're not only accountable to each other, but that we're accountable to our partners, federal and state, our customers, and our stakeholders. We know that focusing and prioritizing all of our work and connecting it to everything that we're doing across the state. So if I'm a field staff providing a direct service, and I also am working with a program manager at our state office that's working on some big project that may have an impact to my day-to-day. I want to know what's going on as that field service person so I can say, hey, this is how that may impact me. And using this enterprise performance management system allows that to happen. There's features in it that allow for tracking projects. So right now, a lot of people are using Monday or, you know, an Excel spreadsheet with a Gantt chart. They're using Microsoft projects or planning. So there's all sorts of tools, and this system allows us to put all of those tools in one place. So it's accessible and available to all staff to see. So another reason for enterprise performance management was to connect all of that in a way that everyone can see that, it's just aligned in a manner to get to those outcomes for our customers. Historically, we have not had transparency in our agency because we've had all these different systems and they haven't been connected. So we have had a problem with gatekeeping. Some people don't want other people to know what they're working on because they don't want the feedback. They don't want to do the stakeholdering. They want to do it their way, and their way is the best way. And so this prevents that for the most part. It creates a level of transparency where you know who's working on what project, also the outcomes of that project, if the project's on track. We have an ability to insert status updates on all of those projects, so our staff can go into it and see, hey, this project related to vendors is on track, it's going to be successful, but I saw the meeting notes and I wasn't at that meeting and I heard you guys are going to do X, Y, Z, and that's a problem. You have no idea the impact that's going to have on my day-to-day. So instead of finding that out after it's been implemented, our staff can see it from those notes, from those status updates, and they can contact the project owner directly. There's a little feature you can click on the name and it pops up an Outlook message, and then the message goes to the owner of that project directly. So there's no issue figuring out who owns what. And before at DVR, that was a major problem. You had no idea who was doing what. And then the other issue that comes with not knowing who's doing what is you may be duplicating efforts and creating problems with your resources, staff capacity, monetary resources. You may be asking stakeholders the same questions from different areas of your agency, and your stakeholders are like, do you not understand what's going on? Like, someone already asked me this. And these are things that have happened at DVR. So again, we needed a system where people could get all that information and remain consistent and transparent and accessible to everybody. One of the things that I think is really important to note if you're not familiar with vocational rehabilitation is that as a program, VR is facing some serious scrutiny on a national level. We are not seeing the outcomes that are expected of us across the nation. Our service quality has dipped a little bit, and we are, again, having issues with that resource allocation. But in a way you wouldn't expect, right? Too much money is actually not a good thing. Because of the pandemic, we had fewer people coming to us for services. So, the money is sitting there waiting to be spent. We're not getting those outcomes. Customers don't want to work in person in a lot of instances because they tend to be people that have immune issues, have disabilities. So we saw a dip in customers coming to us for services. And then service quality. We are not a service that has historically been done virtually. Vocational rehabilitation is very much about being in front of someone face to face, watching mannerisms, talking, interacting, determining barriers that may be presented from someone's disability that could impact employment. And so moving to virtual was a big challenge for the industry, but also for DVR as a division, because we were using paper for everything. We were not technologically advanced. And then you also need to consider how moving into a technologically heavy world impacted people with disabilities who maybe weren't used to using the systems. Maybe they didn't have access to Wi-Fi or internet, and also those barriers for disabilities like being deaf, hard of hearing, maybe English as a second language. So there's all these additional barriers that come up that can impact that service quality and those outcomes. So we know that that's a problem. How do we track that? How do we know where to best utilize our resources? And how do we know where the biggest issue is that we need to tackle? We have to have the data to figure that out. Otherwise, it's all subjective, it's anecdotal, it's qualitative, which is useful, but we also need the quantitative to really support where to focus those resources so we can make sure that we're tracking our efforts and we're able to report that to our federal and state partners who fund us to make sure they know, hey, we're recognizing the issues. We need that data to support the work that we're doing. All right, so you just see a couple more bullets on the screen. We're demonstrating to our partners and stakeholders that we provide essential services and that there's a cost benefit to our program. So the cool thing about this system being accessible to all of our staff is no matter where anyone goes, they can pull up this system. They can show someone consistent information across the board. So we have tribal relations administrator and we have tribal relations liaisons all throughout the state. There are tribal vocational rehabilitation programs across the state as well that we partner with really closely. And our tribal relations administrator goes and presents to those tribes regularly. And prior to the system, she was going to our data person, asking for data regularly. It was always these ad hoc reports. They'd get pulled. She'd have to interpret the data. And then she'd make these really beautiful PDFs for everybody that would be emailed or printed, and they were different. Every time she went, it was different information that was requested, depending on the meeting that she was going to. So with the system now, everything's already updated. It's in there, it's available. We can expand it and get more information. These dashboards are going to be consistent. So every time she goes to a meeting, the information that she needs is already set for her. She can display it, she can share it externally, they can have access to it. The information does stay consistent, but she can also go back to previous dashboards and see the information that was there before. So before she was making these PDFs once a month, and if someone was like, hey, can I get April's information? She'd have to go back into her system, find April, make sure it's whatever they're asking for, and then forward it to them again via email. Now she can just, with a click of a button, back into the dashboard and see the information. So it's easy to access, and it's another way for us to just display information to our stakeholders and partners that highlights, the benefits of our program. Let's see what else is important to tell you. Oh yeah, performance measures as transparent as possible to our staff. So Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act is probably something most people have heard by now, WIOA. It really changed the way that our workforce systems across the country operate, and we are a part of those workforce systems. Even if we are in social services, we still have a very heavy focus in that workforce development. So with WIOA came different focus areas on outcomes. We had to change the way that we were focusing those outcomes that were entirely different to our staff, and we did not do a good job communicating that information when those changes occurred. So our staff knew every day what was expected of them for their job. I know what's expected of me for my day-to-day. You'll see we have an example of a dashboard with our employee engagement survey. We were rated really high there for our staff, but I know how my agency measures success is pretty low. Our staff don't know as an agency the overall outcomes and success measures for the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. They know how to do their job. They don't necessarily have a clear understanding, nor have we made it easy for them to have a clear understanding of how their day-to-day impacts those overall outcomes. So the system and having all of this information accessible and in one place, that enterprise performance management theory is really helping us tie the work that they do day-to-day into those bigger overall outcomes that are what drives the funding source for the program that keeps us going and allows us to continue to do the work so they can continue to do what they love and are passionate about day-to-day. All right, and what are the benefits? So we want to be values driven. We don't want our values just to live on a screen and have it on our website and just say like, hey, these are our values, welcome to DVR. We want to live those values. And so transparency is the first one. We need to be a transparent agency, and not just with data, but with how we're making decisions, why we're making decisions. People need to know that everything we're doing is intentional and forecasted and calculated, and it's not just off the cuff. And part of that is also to build trust. So if we can be transparent, if the information we have is accessible, and not just accessible in terms of, hey, I know where to find it, but like, I can understand this makes sense to me. If you have a disability, it's accessible in terms of the needs that you have, those access needs, then we're living our values. So we know with enterprise performance management now, seeing data all in one place we can quickly identify areas for improvement and we can address those areas. Before, I would have to ask for so many different data reports and figure out what all of those meant, because typically they would come to me in Excel. And as much as I like Excel, I don't like spending hours figuring out pivot tables because I am not an expert. I am not an Excel expert by any means. And so now I don't have to spend that time focusing on Excel. So if we want to talk about lean, and not in the I'm a yellow belt, because I'm not, but in terms of like saving time so I can focus my efforts on bigger things, this is a really lean function for me personally. I get this information in front of me. I can see red, green, yellow, or however, our data is set up. And then I can dive into the bigger questions or the bigger issues in front of me that I need to focus on. So personally, that's a huge benefit for me, having everything in one place. We also are leveraging the use of technology, again, to become more flexible and adaptable. We know that the workforce is changing, the labor market is changing. We cannot continue to operate like we've always operated for our clients and for our partners, or for our employees. Our employees are demanding more technology, more innovation. That's part of the employee engagement piece. They don't want to be in an organization where we're still crunching numbers on a piece of paper. They don't want to be in an organization where they're doing all of their case noting on paper. That's just not the way of the world anymore. So another benefit of having an enterprise performance management system is utilizing that innovation and technology. But again, going back to that resourcing, where can we focus some resources? If we can take time away from one area, i.e. paper, and we see that we've got this new case management system coming that's all online, we can see already that this online service that we have now is actually allowing staff to take time away from all the paperwork that they're doing and focus it directly on customers and client services. And that's huge, because that's why all of our staff are in DVR. They're in social and health services. They're in vocational rehabilitation to serve individuals. So we can take that resourcing and put it somewhere else, in technology, in direct services that achieve outcomes. So it's not all going to be super tangible measures that we see, but we can figure out those indirect measures and indirect actions that are leading to those bigger outcomes. And like I said, increasing employee engagement, breaking down silos. Our staff are connecting across the state in a way they never have before, and so we want to give them tools to continue to do that and to be even more innovative than they already are. And then I already touched on it. The big thing for me is we really need to demonstrate the value of vocational rehabilitation services to stakeholders and partners. We are, as we like to call it, the best kept secret. So if you have anyone that needs to get services from DVR, please let me know. We want them. We want to serve people. We are a life-changing service, and we want to serve everyone we can. And there's a benefit of enterprise performance management and that resourcing piece, because it allows us to focus, again, where we need to focus, certain resources, staff time to really achieve those outcomes and make sure we're serving everyone as much as possible. Pass it back to you.
Yes. Thank you, Cassie. While we do a little adjustment here. All right. Well, as you can tell, establishing a case for change is a really big deal. So important that it's the right thing to do no matter what the project is, whether it's just, straight up lean project or some kind of transformation. That case will serve so well. We're behind the scenes, we made a little adjustment. We're actually going to get to Q&A on time for the most part by actually stopping in about 2 slides from now. So we're going to stop before we actually talk about tools and methods, and then start the Q&A. I do want to make a note about, so why is it that EPM is powerful? It's like, why bother? Do we have to have that? I mean, these are all the questions that people ask all the time. And it turns out there's some real fundamental driver. We know we live in a world where people, process, and technology, a classic model, been around forever. That model has to be balanced. Sometimes it gets balanced as technology, process, and people. And that's actually wrong. It's reversed. It needs to be people, process, and then technology serves us, whatever that is. But it all starts with people, because we cannot transform an organization without that. And that's why OCM, change management, is so important. It's why everything that Cassie just described is vital. So when we have a chance later on to talk a little bit about tools and methods, just know that they're only there to help us focus on the people, and then, of course, the processes that deliver services. Technology as a service to all that. So at this point, if you go forward one slide, please, we're actually going to pause here for Q&A, and I have to do a little coordination here. How are we going to monitor?
And actually get this started, because I did see a good question in the chat. Cassie, I believe this is directed to you. What was your change management approach for those who used to be gatekeepers and reinforcing silos?
Yeah, I don't have a good answer to this because the answer is not change management. It was luck. It was, we had staff turnover. A lot of those people were people who were ready to retire or who chose to leave the agency when they saw the direction that we were going. And it was a lot of just change in culture that we got to a tipping point, which was a very fortunate fact for us. And then, of course, we did focus on change management. We had our case for change. We've been talking about it. We engaged staff and DVR across the agency to help us develop the dashboards, to be our design team, and to go back and be those influencers across the agency. So yeah, I would love to take credit for that, but I can't. It was just pure luck, I think.
All right, I'm going to give this other mic a try. Anybody else have any questions, either online or in the room? If you have anything in the room, feel free to hit that green button on your mic. And if not, folks, feel free to unmute. All right, well, I'm not hearing any questions at the moment. I'm going to go ahead and give the mic back over to Erin and let you continue your presentation. Thank you. Looks like we have an extra second for questions. If I went too quick, unmute now or forever hold your peace.
Are we all set now? So we're going to spend a few minutes now talking about basically tools and best practices. I want to emphasize right up front is that this is a discussion around best practice. It is not a discussion around a specific tool or a specific. I think we're good now. Thank you. It's not a conversation around a specific. Really about what can we all use no matter what we have, and I want to emphasize that going forward. So one of the things that we all have learned is that, again, people, process, technology really make a difference in terms of government performance. It's the same thing in the private sector, but we're talking about government. Turns out the fundamentals map and some kind of tool is important. So listed here, of course, are our language for fundamental maps and result software. But think of it this way, it doesn't matter what they're called. The idea of a fundamentals map, which I'll go into that briefly, is really about understanding our organization, understanding how it works from strategy all the way through its operations from a process point of view, and I've got a topology for that. And in terms of software or technology, all that's important is that it serve that need and that it do all the things that you've heard Cassie describe as what's required to be able to implement a case for change. Just real quickly, many of you have seen over the years a slide that looks like this from us, and the reason for it is that we really believe strongly that there's key pillars that will cause a cultural transformation with enterprise performance management. And those pillars are really the fundamentals that can be replaced with the word process or daily management, depending on your language. Breakthroughs that can be replaced with strategy or projects and initiatives. Problem solving, don't want to replace that. That's problem solving. That's why are we looking at data? To determine what it's telling us, have insights, and take action. And then, of course, have some kind of way of keeping score. So really what this slide says is that with these components, without a question, that you can build yourself a cultural transformation. Many of you have over the years seen this picture, and this just represents a way to look at the Deming cycle, the plan, do, check, adjust cycle that drives everything that we do. From the standpoint of, well, how does that relate to strategy and daily management? The left-hand side is daily management. The right-hand side is strategy, and it all comes together, of course, with a bunch of tools to be able to actually view it, get insights, and make decisions. And for today's purpose, just think of this as being the tools you have today put into action in a rigorous manner. Next slide. So I mentioned plan, do, check, adjust. Most of us have been exposed to that at some point in time. It's, it's the classic Deming cycle. Sometimes, though, it's actually described as just a flat cycle. Plan, do, check, adjust. It's actually a heartbeat. Think about it. Every day, we're doing something that's of a planning nature and a doing and an acting and adjusting. And if, in fact, we're doing that on a regular basis, it pulses. And, not to belabor the metaphor too much, but it's a big difference between being a flat thing that we just say, hey, everybody, we're doing this, versus there's a pulse. Well, what drives the pulse? Well, among many things, is business reviews. If we have monthly business reviews, and of course, quarterly lookbacks, but if we have business reviews on a monthly basis or weekly huddles or daily huddles, now we're pulsing the system, because we're not getting together to just talk about the data and say, oh, pretty pictures. Getting together to make decisions based on insights. That's what makes it cool. Now, if it's going to be living and pulsing, it also has something that has to drive it from a currency point of view. And one of the things that we like to emphasize is that measures are the currency of your management system. And of course, if you think about what Cassie just outlined in the case for change, it's all about having transparent measures and using that to actually drive the system forward. So, belaboring the metaphor just a bit, but just think of it as a living kind of pulsing thing that does have a currency, measures, and does have a heartbeat, which can be weekly, monthly. So I promised to do the taxonomy. I hope I use the right word there. Somebody's going to have to actually check on me, because it's funny, I use words like that, and then sometimes people go, it doesn't mean what you think. Sad news. Anyway, we'll stick with it for now. So this is basically what is a fundamentals map. And what I like to explain it to folks is, it's actually a very logical way to apply lean to your organization in terms of looking at it from a strategic and operating point of view. Real quickly, at the top, you can see mission, vision, values. What is it we said we're going to do, why, and all that. Clearly, the things that strategically drive us. And just imagine that could also be sitting in behind it, strategic initiatives. Great, the specifics. Well, key goals are really important. The enduring goals that are going to last for a long time. That we when we say this is what we want to accomplish, we look at those goals and say this is how we're going to do it. And if that's true, then we better have outcome measures. Those have different names in where you're at. Some people call them KPIs, call them OKRs, call them measures. But what they are the outcome measures that allow us to decide if we actually made the progress we set on the key goals. Now, following that, of course, is the actual processes, the core processes. Why that's important is that we all know what an org chart is, right? We got plenty of them, we publish them. But the problem with an org chart is it sometimes doesn't really tell you anything about how work gets done. I'm sure that if you actually look at the org chart of your organization today, it will be clear in terms of sort of who's assigned to what, but it may not be clear in terms of how do the processes march through time to deliver services to the customer, or in terms of supporting processes, how do they support you? So for example, in the core processes themselves, delivering services might be determining eligibility, or any number of other activities that are logical. What about the supporting processes? The organization can't function without them, because if we take away finance, IT, HR, risk, if we take all that away, our organization can't function. We can't deliver. So those two processes are extremely important to be able to document, and then of course, process measures and owners. So there's accountability and transparency to how it all works. That's the fundamentals map, and it doesn't matter whether you call it a fundamentals map or your lean system or your enterprise management system. all the same, and it's actually kind of fun to do because it brings great clarity, great transparency, kind of fun. I'm going to go through this one really fast because this was not meant to be a session where we talk about technology. This is one point I want to make about it. No matter what technology you choose to use, make sure that it actually can do the things you see on this slide. For example, make sure that it has a presentation layer. Doesn't matter what you use. Tableau, PowerPoint, anything else. Power BI, doesn't matter. But also make sure that it actually has the guts underneath it to be able to connect everybody, to be able to handle the security required for all organizations, especially government, and on and on and on. By the way, it also needs to have the ability and application programming interface to connect to the other systems, because what we don't want to ask people to do is the data twice, or worse, 3 times. I mean, it happens. And so we want to make sure that we connect to the systems that already exist and make life as easy as possible. So heads up, Cassie, I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about data maturity in just a second. I'll just frame this up. There are a lot of different maturity curves that we've all seen in organizations. They range, from data maturity to organizational maturity. There's all kinds of them, and they almost always have multiple steps. We happen to like the 4-step one for describing data maturity. So why are we even bothering? The reason is that we live in a world that's changing so rapidly in terms of data and data analytics that we have to make sure we stay up with it. That can be challenging. And as a quick aside, when people ask me, well, it sounds to me like you can just use ChatGPT to solve that problem. Thank God you laughed. And by the way, all of you guys out there on the Zoom or a team or whatever, make sure that you chuckle a little bit there and share your chuckles, because I hope you will agree that while we all really dig it, the truth is that we're not going to be solving our problems that require us as humans to think by just going and asking technology. In that context, then, I'm going to ask Cassie to take a moment to talk about how the data maturity curve affects her organization and what it all means.
Thanks, Aaron. I would say for DVR as a division, and this may be different across the SHS, I just want to be clear, just talking about DVR specifically. If I'm being very generous, we were probably somewhere in that orange band between instinct and intuition when I moved into my previous role as the deputy director and started moving toward adopting an enterprise performance management system. Like I said earlier, we were really reactionary. It was very ad hoc. We had little to no analytics, so we were not in a place that worked for me personally, and I wanted to see us improve. And in the last year, that was last summer when we started, in the last year, we're nearly too optimized in our data maturity model. Yeah, thank you. It's really exciting. And the only reason I won't say confidently that we are fully optimized is that we are moving toward becoming a data-driven culture. It's not 100% yet. Cultural changes take a while, and that's okay, but we're definitely seeing major improvements in the year. And also, we are not fully integrated. Like I said earlier, we're waiting for our case management system to go live. That will happen in October. And once it's live, we'll pull it into the enterprise performance management system, and it'll be fully integrated. So yeah, we're really excited. It didn't take that long, and it has huge impacts just having all of your data in one place and having it accessible and transparent to all your staff. So thanks, Aaron.
Great, thank you. All right, shift the camera over. Yeah, you can move forward, that's fine, thanks. So we're gonna just pause for a second again, and let's get some Q&A. And I have some folks here in the real world, the non-virtual one, plan out a question, we gotta have some. And meanwhile, everybody out there in the virtual world, surely there has to be a couple questions. So come on, bring them on. We're gonna pause for those.
I'll try a question. Thank you. You mentioned earlier that the system helps to generate insights about where to actively problem solve on. Can you talk about how that problem solving fits back into the system, how you track some of those efforts, and how you kind of pay attention?
Great. I'm going to repeat the question, and I'm going to hand the mic to you. Thank you, by the way. The question, I'll paraphrase the best I can. The question was, so how does the system and the data and all that, how does that actually translate to getting insights that can result in making decisions, problem solve? Is that good enough paraphrase?
Yes, and how do you track that those efforts are taking place, and how do you feed them back into knowing like what got done and how it improved the system?
So tracking the information obviously is something that we need to do better of. So we're still implementing all of that, but we're also implementing our monthly business reviews and quarterly business reviews starting next month. Up until this point, we've been doing those ad hoc, looking at the data and determining where there might be issues and having conversations one-to-one. So not very sophisticated, but we're moving into that right now. And part of this whole process for us has been kind of like waterfall. Like as we go, we had to start somewhere, so we're improving as we go and continually adding new steps. For tracking, we have different project measures in the system. So if we find that there's an issue, there's a feature that we can use that is problem solving. So when we're talking about these issues, we can go into problem solving mode. And Aaron, I'm not the lean person. Aaron knows the technical names for them, so I'll let him add the technical terms, the lean terms to everything in a second. But we can do those problem solving modes and then track projects and efforts in our project like dashboard that's within the system. Does that answer?
That answers my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll give you.
Thank you, Kathy. And again, thanks for the question. The terms are not complicated. First of all, as most of you know, there's a wide variety of problem-solving techniques depending on the size of the problem. You know, if it's something to be done in a couple of days, it's probably just an action plan. If it's something that requires, you know, a little more effort, that might be, could be a lean event of some kind. And of course, there's always re-engineering. I mean, it could be a big event. So problem solving really has to be adjusted to the scale of the problem. But let's just take an example. If it's a fairly small size project, probably going to use something like a 4-box. And a 4-box is nothing more than a few steps forward that allow you to get to the bottom line. But one thing for sure, one of the activities of all problem solving is a problem statement. And I suspect we've all had to, you know, endure a project where the problem statement was confusing, or worse, was actually a solution statement, and then we all pretended as though we were going to get. It never works, right? So, you know, having a problem statement is critical. Having a root cause analysis, again, very familiar terms to the world of Lean or Six Sigma. Having a root cause analysis is important. Probably doing a process flow if it's actually a large project. It'll be important to map out the process, and on and on and on. So in other words, there's all kinds of tools and methods, most of them steeped in Six Sigma and Lean, and others, that all come to bear. The most important thing on problem solving is, number one, don't try to do them all. So that means looking at the data. So visualize that you're in a business review, a monthly business review. You're looking at your outcome measures. And let's just say you had 17 outcome measures that you wanted to care about. And let's just pretend for a moment those outcome measures were mapped into a balanced scorecard. Many of you know what the balanced scorecard is, right? It's got to focus around financial, operations, people, and customer. And so visualize 17 measures, all mapped out like that. What are you going to do? We'll probably look at the ones that are in green and celebrate. Look at the yellows and say, do we need to talk about them, or are they actually trending positive? Look at the reds and say, do we have an action plan? So really the first step before even solving a problem and defining it is which ones do we want to tackle, choose the critical few, and then proceed. Now, all of that is really logical and basic, but without a discipline for it and a system to track it, it can get funky and haywire. Okay, great question.
Do you have time for one or two more, or would you like to proceed? A few came in through the chat.
We really want questions.
I know, you love that engagement. All right, let's do it. Okay, so I did get one sent directly to me, so you all might not see that, but it came first, so I will ask that first. Question for Cassie. How did they get IS to support the adoption of an EPM? Good question. Oh, did he tell you?
You know, honestly, I don't have the answer for that. I was not here when it was originally adopted, so I can't answer that question. I'm the one that implemented it. I wasn't the one that went through the whole process.
Got it, thank you.
Sorry.
Oh, it's okay, thank you. Next question. How has DVR used this new technology and EPM process to ensure that people are only accessing the data they need and are entitled to? So for example, compliance with record keeping and confidentiality rules.
Yeah, we don't have any confidential data in the system. So we don't have client information or staff information. It is all based on process measures and outcome measures. So anything that goes down to the individual level is contained within our case management system and would not be pulled into the enterprise performance management system. However, I do believe that with this system, there are other protections, but we're not using those as a division for personally identifiable information.
Awesome, thank you. And then last question, how is your DVR strategic plan integrated with or reflective of your new EPM solution?
Yeah, that's a good question. So DVR under DSHS is of course required to participate in the strategic plan. We also are required to have a state plan under WIOA with our workforce development partners. So we have two plans that really drive the work that we do, and we try to make sure as best as possible that those are integrated as much as possible, so we don't have plans with all these different goals. So with all these different plans we tie them into our overall agency goals as a division, which feed, of course, the overall goals of our department. And all of the process measures tie from our strategic plan initiatives tie into those outcome measures. So we have initiatives from our strategic plan that are incorporated into the process measures in our fundamentals that lead to those overall outcome measures. What's really important for me is that everything we do is interconnected. We have had a problem for a long time, again, at DVR. We're reactionary, all of those things. And it didn't seem like our efforts were aligned or interconnected across those plans, across just like general initiative efforts. And so we're trying to move toward that interdependencies, that everything we do needs to lead to those major overall outcome measures or goals for our agency. And so having the enterprise performance management system that ties all of those things together and kind of, I think you saw it on the fundamental slide, it's almost like a pyramid. It's the foundational work, process measures that leads to that mission, but in between there's all the goals and initiatives. That's really important to me, and so that's how we're utilizing that information in the system.
Wonderful, thank you. And thank you, community, for all the great questions. I'll let Erin take it away.
Fantastic. First of all, thank you, everybody, for the questions. It makes it a lot more fun. It's just fantastic. And also, thank you for moderating, too. That's great. So I think it's time to basically kind of wrap up with some show and tell around, so what do things look like? What does data look like in terms of samples from a wide variety of examples? Cassie, what do you think? Should we do it? All right. So we're going to go to the next slide. We're going to start by doing some look at some visuals from DVR, and then we're going to look at other agencies and other domains. Cassie?
Great. So this is just an example of a dashboard we have in our system for customer satisfaction. So DVR quarterly sends out a customer satisfaction survey to a sample of our customers, asking them a variety of questions. What you see here is a dashboard that shows you overall satisfaction on a statewide and a regional level. So going back to your question about like addressing particular issues, I'll use this as an example. We can see in this dashboard, we have a bar that's pretty red, and that would be a concern. So we may say that's a big problem. We haven't seen red for a while. Maybe it's just come up and we don't have the current data that shows us, we're all good now. But I would work on, okay, what's the problem? What's the root cause? Can we address this? And then start tracking whatever actions we had for it. So based on this information at a high level, I think most of it was related to staffing issues. We had staff turnover. That particular region was like very understaffed for a long time. And so we saw the impacts of that in that data. And so, addressing that by making sure that not only are we attempting to hire new staff, but We're solving it by creating float positions where other staff can fill in. We're making sure to increase communication with our customers, letting them know that you know, we're short-staffed or whatever, and they have this other counselor who can provide services. So just as an example of how that may work. But yeah, it's really interesting for us to have this information accessible, have this dashboard that's a real quick look. Previous to our system, this would just go out in an Excel spreadsheet via email, and if staff wanted to see it, they could look at it. If not, it would disappear in the inbox, and if they needed to get back to it for some reason, they would have to search their inbox, or hopefully they saved it to their system. So this, again, creates that ability for them to do the one-click hop into the system. I can go to customer satisfaction and see that overall. All right, just another example. This is a specific question we ask our customers, and the question is, or statement that they agree to or don't agree to is, my counselor understands how my disability affects me. So at DVR, we provide services to people with disabilities, and they are individualized for every single person that walks through the door. They are not going to get the same services across the board. It's whatever that individual needs. So it's really important that our staff understand each individual's disability and how it impacts them, how it affects them, so we can help them with counseling and guidance on those barriers that they have for employment and help reduce those barriers. So it's an important question. We want to make sure staff have access to it, because if we see a lot of red here, that's a big problem for our agency. So another example, a high-level overview of just being able to do a one-click and dive into the information and find what you need. Some other features, you know, Power BI has some really cool stuff. You can change the little slicer, dive deeper, and that's all accessible here as well. Oh, this is just an example of employee engagement survey for our staff. So DSHS makes this information accessible for all staff across DSHS. Our staff don't always know where to find it. So being able to pull that into the DVR system, that it's specific to DVR, and let our staff have access to it one click is also really helpful. And as leadership or as work groups happen, they can dive into these dashboards and just go see the information and pull from it to help feed the work that they're doing. Earlier, I talked about how we are pretty high rated for expectations are known, and those expectations, again, are individual expectations, and you can just see on this chart right here that success measures known are sort of at the lower end for us. So we know that that was an area where we needed to improve. So just another way of how we use the employee engagement data. And hopefully next year, this year, the end of the year, when we have that new engagement survey go out, we see this one increase thanks to our enterprise performance management system. And then this is just an example of how we've also pulled in the DSHS level as a department to compare it to DVR to help just see how we're doing as a division compared to the agency overall. So just another view, another way to manipulate the information so we can utilize it to focus our efforts on different employee engagement initiatives.
Thank you, Cassie. So we're going to take a little bit of time to look at different kinds of visuals. And most of them will be government, except for one. And although it's being used in government now, but this one actually came from an application in the commercial side of things, where the challenge was how to look at a fairly large number of measures, not just monthly, but weekly and even daily, and have it be something more than, I'm now looking at 20 or 25 measures. What do I do? Because that can get confusing, right? We're humans. We like to categorize. We like to curate things. So this happens to, of course, be a balanced scorecard where the curation is financial, customer, and patients. And you can see that while those measures don't necessarily match what we do in government, imagine that they were government measures, and how nice it is to be able to say, you know what, I think I want to talk about a particular quadrant. And so if you decide you want to talk about one quadrant or another, you just simply click on it. I'm going to do with my little clicker. And now we went to the financial quadrant. And what's really cool is that instead of having to talk about all 25 or 20, instead you talk about these 4, because you decided you wanted to talk about finance. And again, these kinds of measures are a little bit different what you can usually look at, but just imagine they were like budget, things like that. And all of a sudden, there they are, you can have a conversation and take action. And I can guarantee you that in this particular example, on some of their operating measures, they're taking a lot of action, very specifically with 7-step problem solving, because they're big deals. Okay, so let's take a whole nother look. You've heard me say 3 times, I think, strategy. That strategy is involved with all this, and Cassie did a great job of telling you about how strategy is integrated. Well, what do we do about that? Strategy is really a hard thing to talk about because, you plan it, and then you start executing. What is it you're executing? Typically initiatives. What are initiatives? They are projects, one way or the other. And so that brings up the question of how to look at projects. Now, we're all PMs, project managers. So for us, every one of us, we're used to looking at, classic views, Gantt charts, et cetera. However, sometimes people have a different question, especially if they're executives or they're in a hurry, or if they're stakeholders who don't want to hear the details. Their question is basically, how are we doing? So this is just one example, happens to be from Oregon Fish and Wildlife, and it's just one screen out of many that they use to track major initiatives. This happens to be one about sage grouse. Very cute. I didn't know anything about sage grouses until now. They're very cute, and they have to be, of course, monitored. And there happens to be 5 strategic initiatives. These are a big deal. And when they get together, the first thing they say is, well, how are we doing on those initiatives? So, for example, they might say, S5 is only 20% done. However, I'm not worried about it because they go look at the Gantt chart and realize, but we're caught up today. It's the future that's coming. So in other words, this is an example of taking something like project management, strategic initiative management, and reducing it down to a quick snapshot, followed by a deep dive into the Gantt chart, and then the most important part, which is not the Gantt chart, but it's all the comments that are inserted that say, how are we really doing day by day, week by week, because that's how we determine whether we need to apply resources or not, and also how we have institutional knowledge sharing, because people move on, leave, retire, and as a result, we need to be able to capture that invaluable information. Now, I realize that I'm going to really be stretching the metaphor, but this is an example. This is an example of how you tie the importance of people to the tool. Because if the tool tells you about all kinds of stuff, but not the people side, not the comments, then you've kind of lost out something. Absolutely. I'm going to hand the mic now to Cassie.
One more thing I want to add about the impact of something like this is, for me, having a lot of staff that are my direct reports. I spend a lot of time in one-to-one meetings, and in those meetings, we were talking before about, this is where I'm at, this is how the project's going, I'm doing well in this area, I need help in this area. With our system now and having all this information accessible, not only to me, but to everyone, I can go in at any time I have a free second and check how a status update is going for one of my staff. So if I have 5 minutes between meetings, because we all have meetings back to back on the calendars right now, I can spend that 5 minutes just checking, like, hey, did policy get this work done? Where are they at in this particular issue? As our quality analyst person, are they where they need to be for this project that we've got a really close due date on? So it gives me that opportunity to look as I need to, and then when we have one-to-one check-ins, we can use that time more effectively. We can use that time for coaching and mentoring and building those relationships. We can work on professional development. We can address the issues that are maybe like really high concerns in the meetings, instead of spending all of that time just having status updates and reports. So that's another really big benefit for me as someone who has a lot of direct reports, is just knowing that we can use our time better, more effectively, more efficiently. And then also it saves them time, because they don't have to meet with me all the time either. They just need to reach out as there are big issues or concerns that come up. Thanks.
Cassie, that's great. All right, well, we are just about ready to wrap up. We've got 2 more slides, and I'm going to advance it. They gave me the clicker, and now I'm having too much fun with it. which means that Teresa doesn't have a job anymore. Thank you. So, two more slides, and they represent another view of data. This is a heat map, and most of us have seen some variation of a heat map. We use this a lot with different agencies, but it always looks different because everybody has a different view of, well, of course, the data, but actually how many tiles and also the style of the tiles. So just know that this is one example out of just dozens. You're looking at a DMV, so you all know what that is, which is motor vehicles. And if you look at those measures for a moment, you know, you can kind of see how critical they are, right? Because, you know, customer wait time, that's a big deal. For those of us who have had the experience, long a wait, we usually get impatient, walk out of the office or whatever. But fortunately, in the state of Washington, that's not the case. Because the state of Washington invested heavy in the licensing effort, and now most of us get it in the mail. And I've gone to the DMV offices to get like what do you call it, the enhanced license, and wow, that process was like that. So Washington's really got together. This is not Washington. However, I want to make a point of this, that if you've got 8 to 10 measures that are absolutely critical, you want to look at them every day until they're done, then a heat map is a great way to go because it gives you a very fast look at how they're doing, red, green, yellow, what their actual numbers are, what the targets are. It might be hard to see, but for example, with vacancy rate, 15.3% vacancy. So a lot of corrections are running at 10%, but 15 is pretty high. And notice, of course, the target is 8, which isn't exactly spectacular, but it's better than 15. Clearly, I'd want to drill down on that. Now, the example I have for drill down doesn't actually happen to be that one. So I'm going to use my clicker again and pretend as though I clicked on, let's see, which one did I click on? I clicked on, here, I'll cheat, digital adoption. So I'm going to pretend like I actually did that in a live mode. And when you decide to look at something in detail, now you can have a view like this. Now, again, this is highly customized. So you're just looking at what one agency wanted. It's almost always different, but notice there's some really cool things here. Number one, I can see the entire trend. In this case, I'm probably going to have a conversation around, do I really believe the yellow is going to get better? Not so sure about that. So I might have a small action plan, if not a big one. I can also decide that I don't want to have to jump around and click around because I'm lazy. And so I can just go to the top and just pick a button and go to the next one. Furthermore, I probably am sitting in a room with people can't remember what the calculation is. Well, rather than insult them, I just click a button and it pops it up. And I wish I could do that here, but you know, too dangerous to do a live demo on this kind of thing. But it would be fun because all these things would be happening, and on and on and on. So my only point is that we've shared with you now some different kinds of visualizations, which really answers the question, if I've got APM, Enterprise Performance Management, if I'm using it to do all the things that Cassie discussed in terms of change, then ultimately I'm going to have data. And if I've got data, how can I display it to maximize its utility for every kind of viewer, whether they be an executive, entire staff, an stakeholder, or even a citizen? And the answer to that question is flexible and actually asking the question, what do they want to see? Flex into it. Back now to our moderators.
Thank you so much. I do have a couple questions for you that came through in the chat. All right, the more recent question, they say, I apologize if I missed this. Did you discuss how your data collection is structured? Is it a manual process or automated, pulling from systems that can measure these items?
Thank you for the question. The data structure, the data model, is actually patterned exactly after that fundamentals that we went through, that topology thing. So what that means is it's really structured so that you can have your key goals. Well, actually, it starts with your vision, mission, values, but then your key goals, your outcome measures, your processes and process measures, and sub-processes are all connected. So you don't have to invent the architecture. That's just a fancy way of saying you don't have a blank slate. You get to just start with that structure. And again, you know, it's a lean structure, so it works basically for everybody because it represents a lean system. So that's the first step is it architected so I don't have to start, from scratch? Yes. Then secondly is, how do I get the data in? Well, the first thing is to set the measures up. That's pretty straightforward. And most of us are used to that because if we've been in Excel, we've had to set measures up and put thresholds and targets. Same thing, so you just do that. Now, in terms of data entry, there's three kinds. There's manual, which we recommend get started, just do it. But of course, there's also a batch process in case one has to use a flat file and import it. And then lastly, an API or an application programming interface that allows it to be connected very simply to any system that will output and speak to the API through a piece of middleware. So 3 ways to do it that go from manual to fully automated.
Love it. Thank you. Next question. How many standards of deviation do you use in your control charts, and what is your vertical axis referring to? That was an earlier question. It might have applied to another screen. So if you put that question in, Jeremy, if you're still on the line, do you want to unmute?
Yeah, sure. Hi there. Big fan of
Hi.
control charts. My question is in regards to your control chart page where you were showing your variety of region comparisons, and there was a unit of 50. So I was just trying to figure out what that unit was in terms of reading. And then as a follow-up, so 2 questions was, I know that sometimes when doing control charts, it's challenging if you're only able to get month-to-month data, because it could take months before you know, well, is this really noise or is it a actual process change due to policy or new staff, which could make it difficult to address any changes that you might need. So I was curious about like what do y'all do in those types of situations?
So what you see for the DVR customer satisfaction comparisons is percent response positive. So the 50 is percent of the respondents responded positively to that question. Does that answer your first question on? Okay. And then I think the other questions would be for Aaron. These your questions or answers? Okay. Julia.
There's another one.
There is another one from Jeremy, and I'm going to go ahead and just read it, Jeremy, because he might have been trying to find that slide and didn't hear it. So how has it been measuring at the month level? It seems like if you apply Lean Six Sigma rules of thumb, it may take months before you address a process challenge. Is there more detailed data?
Oh, yeah. So for this one in particular, this is quarterly. And this for customer satisfaction, it depends on the way that our data display, our data collections for DVR work. So some things are daily, some things are monthly, some things are quarterly, and some things are annual. And some of those things we don't have control over because they're owned by OFM or DSHS or a different entity that kind of tells us what we have to do with that. But other things are up to us. So like I said, this one's quarterly. Jeremy, did that answer the question?
We did just have another one come in. Oh, that's for us. Let's see. Will Results Washington be bringing in other companies for us to see that offer solutions, tools, and consulting like the one that's being highlighted here? Many agencies have different tools and consultancy used, and there are many new companies around the world. Good point. Yeah, we really try for the most part to get at least 90% of our presenters to be actual state agency presenters. So that would be a good question that I'll take back to our leadership. Not sure. I just know that when we do the scheduling, the majority of the folks we want to schedule are state agency presenters, but Mass Ingenuity is, they were on our list, so we brought them on board. So I will take that question back to leadership and get back with you on that. Thank you. Yeah, any questions in the room? No? All right, well, oh, we got another one. Is there any discussion at the state level to create more operability between agencies to create more community of services? Obviously, it would be limited in scope. Anyone in here want to answer that? I'm looking at my director. Mandeep, do you have a mic over there?
Thank you for the question, Jeremy. I think we'll be looking at kind of assessing that within the next 6 to 7 months, what actually other COPs exist and what the commonalities are. So this was our attempt, this COP to kind of combine lean and CI. Before it used to be only CI, so only lean. So our intent was to bring different practitioners in this forum. So, but we have I think we know only a few other agencies who have COP, but we don't really have at this point assessment of what other COP exists in this. But within the next 6 to 7 months, I think we'll have a better kind of gaze on that.
All right. I really appreciated this presentation. One of the things that just kind of stuck out in my mind was in the beginning when you started talking about the lower numbers you were hitting as far as customer satisfaction and all that. I really think that was courageous to come out and share that, and the fact that your agency now, and when I say agency, DVR, is so big on the transparency. I had commented that earlier. I just want to thank you for that. I think this was a great presentation, and then all the data displayed, definitely crucial to making positive change, right? Organizing it all and just being clear with everyone where we're at and where we need to go, and that's how we're going to get better. So thank you so much for that. Let's see, we got a couple others. All right. Yes, okay. That was a direct message. I'll get that list to you, Jeremy. Thank you. All right, well, we've got a few more minutes. If there's any other questions for our presenters here, feel free to unmute. All right, I'm not hearing anybody else, so thank you so much. You all have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday. Thank you to our presenters for coming and experimenting with this hybrid meeting that we are doing for the second month. We really appreciate you traveling and being here in person, answering all these great questions. The impromptu question session from Aaron to get that extra engagement. We love it, we appreciate it, and thank you all for attending. Have a